Game Night Studios here with a how to paint Jabba tutorial. I love painting this mini because it doesn't take very long and it's a great introduction to shading. This is a great mini. It's only 3 pieces, it's super easy to put together, but if you notice it's got this big seam going through the back of it where you connect the head to the body. So no matter how well you paint it, if you leave something like that, it's going to stick out. So you want to grab some plastic putty from Vallejo. Some people use green stuff. You can use green stuff. I've used green stuff plenty of times. It's good stuff. It's good green stuff. This stuff I have just started using, and it's real smooth. It goes on super easy. You don't have to mix anything together. You just get yourself a little tool and push it into the cracks. You want to smooth it out a bit once you get it in there. That will hide that seam completely and it'll be like it's never even been there. That's going to be super easy to do on his skin texture because it's not a perfectly flat, even surface. You don't have to be quite as crisp and perfect as if it was some sort of flat robot or flat tank surface. You just push this stuff directly into any of the cracks. So you can do this with green stuff as well. It's just your preference. Once you get it where you need it, smooth it out with your thumb, and then go in with the tool and a little more and fix any kind of small imperfections that might have caused. Once you let that dry, it's perfect. It's done. You will not even notice that when this model is finished. So grab my Awada Eclipse or your airbrush, any kind you got will work. Grab some airbrush thinner. We're going to be establishing the base coat of this mini right now. Now, if you use spray paint, that'll work just as well. Any kind of spray paint's fine. I like the Vallejo Surface Primer Black, especially in the airbrush because it goes on super smooth, super nice. If you use spray paint, it's trickier because there's more to worry about than if you use an airbrush. Airbrush, you can put the paint, the surface primer, whatever, exactly where you want it and in the exact consistency you want it. There's little to no worry about overspray. You're not going to put too much on so that it fills in the details and it builds up a bad texture you don't want. With spray paints, you do have to worry about that. It's a skill involved in using the spray paints that you don't have to worry about so much with the airbrush. Like if you hold the spray can too close or too far away, it's going to screw up the texture of the paint. If you hold it down for just a split second too long, it's going to build up too much texture. If it's too cold outside or too hot outside, that'll mess with the airbrush or the spray paint as well. So I just like using the airbrush. It's easy. It's smooth. Like I said, there's no better way to do it than that in my opinion. So we got the base coat on there. Either way you did it, with a spray paint, airbrush, doesn't matter. Now we're going to build up the green. We got some olive drab here, MSP Master Series. I believe Reaper makes this paint, but I'm not 100% sure about that. This is going to be the base of the mini. So we're going to put a bunch of that in the airbrush with some water and airbrush thinner. And we're going to hit the entire mini with this color. We're going to be doing 2 coats. That way we ensure that it's smooth on there. We didn't put too much on. And we're going to hit the entire mini. Jabba's got a nice little green tint to him. So we're going to be adding some shading later. But just hit it all over. I love Reaper paints. They airbrush really well. They also paint really well. You don't need to really add a whole lot of water to them to make them work well. They're just good paint, honestly. And they have any and every color you could ever think of. And they airbrush so nice. You just mix it in the pot with, like I said, water and airbrush thinner, and then it's good to go. When using the airbrush to establish a good base coat on something like this, you want to be careful not to put too much. Like I say, 2 quick coats will be perfect for this mini, and that'll get you a nice base coat. You won't have a texture buildup. If you just go full tilt on the trigger and just coat this thing with paint, then it's going to build up exactly where you don't want it. It's going to build up in all those creases where he's got all this nice fine detail. All those details are going to pop later when we add shading and a wash to this. But if we fill them up with paint now, it's just game over. There won't be any details to add the wash to. So once you get this established, we're going to be adding some shading to it. Grab some amber gold, again, MSP, Reaper Master Series paint. Just put that right in the pot with the green you were still using to do the base coat. If you have a floor fan, that's going to make this whole process a lot quicker and easier. You can just set the mini in front of the floor fan and let it dry while you get the next coat ready on the paint. And then by the time you get it all mixed together and ready to go, the mini's dry. You can get right to it. There's no sitting around and waiting. You don't have to let the initial green that you had clog your airbrush because you're sitting around waiting for anything to dry. It's just already good to go. So if you notice, we're going to put this highlight color actually on the bottom of his little slug tail and on his stomach and on his face. Now we want to come up a little bit high with this because that's going to shade that green of his body along with this kind of gold tannish green color. Since we put it directly into the base coat, we shouldn't have to worry about any kind of speckling effects. Speckling, if you're not familiar with the term, it's if you put, say, just white in the airbrush and tried to spray it on top of a black mini or a black surface, you're going to get a whole bunch of little dots everywhere because it's not a smooth transition. That's what speckling is. So mixing that highlight color directly into the base color is going to completely eliminate that speckling, and it's going to make the transition between the colors super smooth. So we got them on there. Next up, we're going to add the next level of highlight. So we're going to grab some Secret Weapon Miniature Yellow Rust. Again, pop that directly into the pot. We didn't dump anything out. We didn't change paint at all. We're just adding that yellow rust right in there, and that's going to add a nice, different color transition to that highlight. And it's going to give him that little yellowy tint, because Jabba isn't solid green or shades of green. He transitions. He goes from green to almost like a browny kind of yellow color, and that's what we're doing with this. We're not going to come up and cover everything we just hit with that initial highlight. We're just going to hit the edges of the surface and that big flat belly, wherever light would be hitting less, I guess, from top down, except on his face, because that's just where he naturally has more shading. So once we get that color initially set in there, we're going to add more highlighting. We're actually going to dump that pot, grab just the yellow, and we're going to mix it with one other color, the amber gold again. That way we've taken the green out. We've got that nice transition since we did the green, the amber gold, and the yellow rust to get that second level of highlighting. This is going to be the final level, and it's going to make it really bright and get the colors just how we want them on this mini. We're not going to hit absolutely everywhere because this is just the highlight. We're going to hit the belly, we're going to hit a little bit on the face, we're going to hit the edge of the tail where it pokes out, but I'm not going to worry about getting this everywhere because that'll undo the subtle transition we did between the green and the yellowy color. Now, obviously we're going to have to wash this model. A good wash game is paramount to mini painting. Like, that's what you need to be able to focus on, and that's going to be, it's a solid thing. You need it to get good minis. Your wash game is the biggest thing you can do. But a part of a good wash game is setting up the highlights beneath it. If you notice, he's a little bit bright. Like, he's not as dark as he would be on the tabletop or on the movie screen where you would see him, which is exactly what we want, because we're going to hit him with a wash and dumb all of this down. But since it has that initial brighter, lighter color underneath it, it's going to pop really well. So we're going to hit it with some gloss. I like the Vallejo gloss varnish. You can hit it with some Tester's gloss. It's going to do pretty much the same thing. I just like the Vallejo one because it's a bit simpler. Or it's not as simple, sorry. But it's, like I said, it's not a aerosol can. So you can get exactly as much as you want, exactly where you want it. I like doing 2 coats of that. If you're using the airbrush technique, 2 coats with it, you basically just want to get the mini to look like it's wet. You don't want to just cover this thing and just glob it on there, because it'll get in all the cracks and details and mess everything up. But what this is going to do is not only lock in that initial base green shaded color, but this is going to break up the surface tension of the wash so that you're not going to get anywhere near as much pooling as you would if it wasn't glossed. And it's going to go right in the cracks exactly where we want it. We're going to go nuts with this wash. We're going to use military shader, strong tone, mild brown, and quick shade mixing medium so that it's not quite as bright. 2-3 drops of mixing medium and then 2 drops of all these other colors. And that's going to be our wash for the entire mini, because like I said, he's basically skin tone. But it's going to add a real nice dynamic color with different levels of brown, and it's even going to add some green in there. And since we put that quick shade mixing medium in there, it's not going to be quite as strong as it looks once it dries. That tends to mute everything down a little bit. It's like watering down your washes, but it works a little bit better than water. Water tends to add kind of a weird effect to it. It doesn't go on quite right. I add a little, like I damp a brush down when I stir everything together. That's all the water I add to my washes. Since we added that gloss to the mini, it's not gonna pool nearly as bad. It's gonna go exactly where you want it in all of these creases. So, like I said, a good wash game is the cornerstone to good mini painting, in my opinion. You want to hit every area of this mini with this wash. And then we're going to go in with the same brush. We're going to wipe it on the table a little bit to get some of the wash off, and we're going to get rid of any pooling that we have on there. So you can you don't need to be as careful when you're putting it on, because we're going to go back and we're going to fix any kind of pooling. Like right now, he's got some pooling on his face. He's got some pooling on his back. But if you notice, we just go in there with the brush and we just wipe some of that away. And there we go, he's good. He's got a nice little pooling spot in his back. Just touch it with that brush. It's gone. You don't need to worry about it. If you let that dry when it's pooled, it's going to be real hard to fix, and it's going to look really ugly, and it's going to stand out. But since we added that gloss, there's not going to be much of it. If you didn't add that gloss, then you might have to take a little bit more time on this step, going back and making sure it's not pooling anywhere you don't want it. But when it dries, you can tell it's beautiful. It's on there. It's exactly where we want it. It didn't pool. That skin tone's almost perfect the way it is. We're going to grab some brown rust, MSP, Master Series again, and that's going to be our eyes. Now, the paint looks more brownish red in real life. For some reason on my webcam it looks a bit brown, like it looks more brown than it does red, but it's a nice browny red color. I love it for his eyes. I also use it for Rebels a lot because it's the perfect Rebel color, but it works beautifully for his eyes. His eyes they're sunk in, and they have the pupil area cut out in them. So these are the easiest eyes to paint of any mini ever, because there's no guesswork, there's no risk that you're going to put the pupil in the weird spot and make them look cross-eyed or goofy looking. They're right there. You just paint them. You paint the outside of the eyes this brown color, and then you go in with a black and you hit those pupils, and then he's done. I like using Deco Art black for most of my blacks, just because it's cheap, it's easy, it's right there. If I'm using on a bigger surface, I might use an actual mini painter black, but the Deco Art stuff, it's like $1 for a giant tube. You never run out of it. I use this to black out all my bases. Since this is just a tiny detail, I used it on his eyes. But highlight, we're going to grab amber gold and yellow rust, and this is actually what we're going to use to not only highlight, but we're also going to use it to cover up any kind of little mistake we might have made painting the eyes. Hit anything that's kind of raised up on his face. I wouldn't touch anything to the skin tone, because we did all the work we had to do with that wash and it looks good. Why mess with it if it looks good? But he's got some little forehead wrinkles that stick up you can hit, and you hit those under part of his eyelid. That is it's gonna add that lighting dynamic effect to it. We're not gonna use this to paint the upper part of his eyelid unless we absolutely have to. If you've gotten some of that eye color on that lid, I would use just a real tiny amount of this to cover up that, but other than that, the upper eyelid should be good. That wash got in there and it shaded everything perfectly. He's got some eyebrow ridges that we're going to want to add a real tiny amount of this paint to give it that dynamic shading effect. Because those are going to stick out, we just put a nice little edge highlight on them and they're good. Hit that upper lip. You want to be aware of where the lighting would be hitting this Mini. So if he's sitting on the table and there's a lamp above him, or say he's in the desert and there's the sun above him, that light's going to be coming down, and that's where we're going to want to put those lighting effects. We aren't going to want to stick them on like the roof of his mouth, because there'd be no light hitting there. It wouldn't make any sense. We wouldn't want to edge highlight the under part of his belly, because it wouldn't make any sense. Light wouldn't be hitting there. So we got him done. Jabba's finished. Now we got to paint the base. What I like doing is getting a bigger brush and painting the flatter surfaces of the base, and then grabbing a small brush. It doesn't need to be a detail brush, but just something thin that you're not going to get any of this black paint on the Mini, because we put all that time and effort into making that green spectacular. We don't want to mess it up by hitting it with black at this point. So take your time, be careful. Like a couple extra minutes making sure that black on the base is carefully done is going to save you a lot of time. Having to go back and touch up that green is a pain, because you pretty much have to repeat all those steps to get that shading looking right. But you black out the base, and then Jabba's finished. Like, we let that dry and Jabba's done. We have a beautiful looking Mini ready for the tabletop. I've probably painted him about 7 times because people love him. I love him. He's easy, he's quick, he's beautiful. Done. And Jabba. I hope you guys like that. I'm going to be coming out with more painting tutorials. I'm trying to do at least one a month, depending on my schedule. If I can get out more than that, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out more than that. But yeah, Game Night Studios. Like me, follow me, subscribe. Hit me up if there's anything you'd like to see.